At 75, Evelyn Hart had learned that silence had its own voice. It lived in the creaking floorboards of her old house, in the sway of the porch swing her late husband built, in the way dust floated through sunbeams like tiny memories refusing to settle. For most people, this house was just wood and brick. For Evelyn, it was a living scrapbook. Every corner carried a fingerprint of her past, a laugh, a tear, a lesson, a story. She had lived here for 52 years. She arrived as a young bride with trembling excitement, stumbling into adulthood with nothing but hope and a man who believed she could make a home out of anything. And she did. She raised 2 children here, Michael and Clara, both born in the upstairs room whose wallpaper still held faint outlines of cartoon ducks she painted by hand. She cooked meals in the same kitchen where her husband, Daniel, kissed her neck while she stirred soup. She tended a garden where her children once chased fireflies and scraped their knees. Life had not always been kind, but the house never betrayed her. After Daniel passed, the house became her anchor in a world that moved too fast for her old bones. Her children, busy with their own families, promised to visit every week, then every month, then soon. Soon stretched into seasons, seasons stretched into years. Their visits became polite obligations. 30 minutes of hurried conversation, eyes glued to their phones, hands tapping impatiently on their thighs. But Evelyn never complained. Children grow up, she would whisper to herself. They grow busy, not cold. At least that's what she chose to believe. Every morning, she would wake with a routine that kept her grounded. She brewed tea in Daniel's old ceramic cup, humming the tune he loved. She walked through the garden, touching the petals of roses she had planted on their 25th anniversary. She read books on the porch, waving at neighbors who passed by. And every evening, she wrote short letters to her children, though she rarely mailed them. It felt easier to talk to paper than to people who no longer listened. Still, Evelyn's heart held a stubborn flame of hope. So when her children called one cloudy Thursday afternoon, her hands trembled with joy. "Mom, we're coming this weekend," Michael said. "We want to spend real time with you," Clara added, her tone unusually soft. Evelyn's chest tightened, but in a good way. Real time. Those words felt like rain after a drought. She spent the next 2 days preparing like a woman half her age. She dusted shelves, washed curtains, polished silverware, even baked Daniel's favorite cinnamon bread, just in case the scent brought back memories for the children too. She set out the old family albums, imagining laughter as they flipped through pictures. Maybe they finally missed her. Maybe they wanted to reconnect. Maybe, for once, they remembered she was more than a chore to check off. The morning of their visit, Evelyn sat on the porch swing, wearing her best lavender dress. Her silver hair was pinned neatly, and she wore the pearl earrings Daniel gave her on their 40th anniversary. She wanted to look her best. After all, her children were coming home. When she saw their car approaching, her heart fluttered like a girl seeing her loved ones return from a long trip. She stood quickly, gripping the rail for support. Finally, she thought. Finally, I won't eat dinner alone. She believed love was walking toward her. But she didn't know that something far colder was coming through her door. Michael stepped out of the car first, straightening his tie as if he were arriving at a business meeting instead of his childhood home. Clara followed, adjusting her sunglasses, her expression unreadable. Evelyn didn't notice the stiffness in their smiles. She only saw their faces, the ones she had kissed goodnight 1,000 times. She opened her arms, expecting warm embraces. Michael hugged her sideways, barely touching her. Clara gave a quick squeeze before brushing past her and heading straight toward the house. "Your garden hasn't changed at all," Clara said, but there was no admiration in her voice, only distant observation. "It's beautiful, Mom," Michael added, though he didn't even glance at the flowers. Evelyn didn't let the odd tone bother her. She was too happy to have them near. "Come inside, dears. I made cinnamon bread, just like you used to love." They exchanged a quick glance. Not warmth, communication. Inside the house, they moved with an energy Evelyn had never seen before. Not the lazy saunter of children returning home. Not the wandering pace of nostalgia. No, they walked with purpose. Too much purpose. Michael opened the hallway closet, writing something in a small notebook. Clara walked into the living room, pulling open drawers, checking labels on jars, taking photographs on her phone. Evelyn blinked. Sweetheart, what are you doing? Oh, nothing. Clara smiled too widely. Just taking notes on what needs updating. We want to help you, Mom. Help me? Evelyn repeated, confused. Yes, Michael chimed in. This place is old. Hazardous. You shouldn't be alone here. Evelyn felt a small shiver crawl across her spine. I've lived here all my life. I'm perfectly fine. But they weren't listening. They were already moving again. At lunch, they sat at the table, but the warmth Evelyn expected didn't arrive. They barely touched the cinnamon bread. Michael scrolled through documents on his tablet. Clara's knee jittered beneath the table. So, Clara began, we've been talking to some people. What people? Evelyn asked. Financial advisors, Michael answered. Social care consultanetese. Estate planners. Evelyn frowned. Estate planners? Why would I need that? Michael exhaled sharply, as if she had asked a childish question. Mom, you're 75. You can't maintain a house this big anymore. I maintain it just fine, Evelyn replied softly but firmly. They ignored her again. Clara reached into her purse and pulled out a stack of papers clipped together. We've arranged something to make your life easier. Evelyn's heartbeat stumbled. Arranged what? A transition, Michael said. A safer living situation. A facility, Clara clarified. Just temporary. Until the house is sold. Evelyn froze. Sold? Her breath caught in her throat. You're selling my house? It's for your own good, Michael said, using the tone of a man explaining math to a child. We've already started the process, Clara added. The word struck Evelyn like cold water thrown over her head. You started what process? Michael slid a paper toward her. A legal form with her name, their signatures and hers, forged in smooth handwriting she didn't recognize. You've been declared unfit to manage your assets, he said. It's better this way. You'll be taken care of. Evelyn stared at them, her hands trembling. You forged my name. We prefer the word assisted, Clara said gently, as if talking to a fragile vase. Evelyn pushed her chair back, her voice cracking. You came to take inventory, not to visit me. The silence that followed was heavier than grief. Michael closed his notebook. We'll come back tomorrow with the moving arrangements. Clara kissed her cheek, a cold, empty kiss. Don't make this harder than it has to be, Mom. And then they left, taking her keys, her papers, and the illusion that family meant love. Evelyn stood alone in the kitchen, cinnamon bread cooling on the table, the smell of betrayal filling the room. The facility they placed Evelyn in was clean, quiet, and painfully unfamiliar. The walls were sterile white, the air filled with the faint scent of disinfectant, and the hallways echoed with the soft shuffle of people who had been placed here for their own good. Evelyn sat on the edge of her new bed, a narrow single cot with stiff sheets, and tried to steady her breathing. Her home, her memories, her life's work, was suddenly unreachable. Her children had taken her keys, her independence, and almost her identity. She felt stripped bare, as if they had peeled away everything that made her who she was. But pain, she learned, had a strange way of sharpening the mind. The next morning, she wandered into the common room, trying to gather her thoughts. A familiar voice stopped her. Evelyn? As I live and breathe, is that you? She turned and blinked. Standing a few feet away was Margaret Thorne, her high school friend she hadn't seen in nearly 50 years. Margaret, her once fiery companion, was older now, wrinkled, silver-haired, leaning slightly on a cane, but her eyes still sparkled with mischief. Margaret, Evelyn whispered. The two women embraced, and for a moment, Evelyn felt a flicker of comfort. They sat together, and Evelyn shared everything. The forged documents, the inventory notebooks, the betrayal disguised as concern. Margaret listened quietly, her hands tightening around her cane. My dear, they've committed fraud. They can't just take your house. Not legally. Evelyn sighed. But what can I do? They say I'm unfit, that I can't manage my own affairs. Margaret smirked. Then it's a good thing you're not alone anymore. As if summoned by her words, a man approached them. A tall, thin gentleman with silver spectacles and steady eyes. Margaret introduced him as Mr. Harris, a retired lawyer who had once specialized in property law. Margaret told me your situation, he said. If everything you've said is accurate, your children have overstepped the law by miles. Evelyn swallowed. But they had documents, signatures, proof. Harris adjusted his glasses. Forged proof is still a crime. And if you never agreed to be declared unfit, then the declaration itself may have been manipulated. For the first time in days, Evelyn felt a spark of hope. Then came Lila, a young social worker in her 20s who often visited the facility. She had kind eyes and a habit of listening more than talking. She overheard part of the conversation and stepped closer. Ma'am, if you believe your children misled the court or forged anything, I can file a report for an investigation. You don't have to fight this alone. Evelyn looked at her. This stranger who owed her nothing yet offered support without hesitation. The contrast between this kindness and her children's greed struck her like a blow. And something inside her shifted. She was old, yes, but she was not weak. 40 years of raising children, caring for a husband through illness, building a home from almost nothing. These were not the achievements of a fragile woman. They thought I wouldn't fight back, Evelyn said softly. Margaret squeezed her hand. Then proved them wrong. Their plan formed quickly. With Harris's legal guidance, they requested copies of the documents her children had filed. Harris reviewed every page meticulously, circling suspicious signatures and highlighting legal inconsistencies. Lila filed formal reports demanding investigations into elder fraud, financial abuse, and unauthorized property seizure. But the real breakthrough came from Evelyn herself. One night, while sitting in the common room, she remembered something. A distant detail from her early marriage. She hurried to Margaret. Daniel had added a clause. Evelyn whispered breathlessly. When we bought the house, he insisted that I be granted lifelong ownership. He said, no matter what happens, this home will always be yours. Harris nearly leapt from his chair. If that clause exists in the original deed, your children have no legal authority to sell the house. None. They sent a request to the county archives. 3 days later, the deed arrived. There it was, written in Daniel's steady looping handwriting. A clause protecting Evelyn's right to remain in the home for the rest of her natural life. She stared at the paper, tears blurring the letters. Her husband had protected her. Her children had betrayed her. Now she would protect herself. And as Evelyn held that document, her sorrow hardened into resolve. The woman they underestimated was gone. In her place stood someone they had awakened. Quiet, patient, and ready for justice. The courthouse smelled faintly of polished wood and old paper. A scent Evelyn would remember for the rest of her life. She sat between Margaret and Lila, her spine straight, her hands resting calmly in her lap. The woman who had arrived at the facility terrified and defeated was gone. Now, Evelyn carried a quiet fire within her, steady and unshakable. When Michael and Clara walked into the courtroom, they were dressed like people attending a business negotiation. Sharp suits, crisp collars, cold eyes. They didn't look at Evelyn. They didn't greet her. They simply took their seats with the smug certainty of people who believed they had already won. Evelyn watched them without blinking. How strange, she thought, that strangers could wear her children's faces. The judge entered, and the room fell silent. The case began with Michael's confident voice echoing through the chamber. He spoke with rehearsed concern, insisting he and Clara acted only out of love. He claimed Evelyn was forgetful, unsafe, incapable of managing her home. Clara dabbed her eyes dramatically at all the right moments, playing the part of the worried daughter. Evelyn listened quietly, like one listens to a story they've already read and know the ending to. Then the judge turned to her side. Mr. Harris stood, adjusting his glasses. Your Honor, he began calmly, what we have here is not concern. It is not protection. It is a calculated act of elder fraud, coercion, and property theft. He handed the judge the deed, the original document with the lifelong ownership clause written by Evelyn's late husband. This alone invalidates every action the children attempted regarding the sale of the property, Harris said. They had no authority to take inventory, no authority to file papers, and certainly no authority to remove her from her home. Clara's face drained of color. Michael clenched his jaw so hard Evelyn thought he might break a tooth. But Harris wasn't finished. He placed the forged signature documents on the evidence table. These signatures, he continued, are not Evelyn Hart's. A handwriting analyst has already verified this. In addition, we have reports filed by social worker Lila Monroe detailing irregularities in the children's claims, including misclassification of Evelyn's mental state without any medical evaluation. The judge flipped through the evidence, his expression darkening. And finally, Harris said, we have a testimony from the facility's staff confirming Evelyn shows no signs of cognitive impairment and no inability to care for herself. Michael opened his mouth, but the judge raised a stern hand. I've heard enough. He removed his glasses, leaned forward, and spoke the words Evelyn never expected to hear. The court rules in favor of Evelyn Hart. All fraudulent documents are hereby void. The attempted property seizure is nullified. The children are ordered to pay fines for their actions and are barred from making any further legal decisions on her behalf. Clara gasped. Michael cursed under his breath. But Evelyn simply breathed. A long, gentle breath that tasted like freedom. Later that afternoon, she walked up the familiar path to her house. The roses in the garden swayed softly, as if welcoming her home. Margaret and Lila walked beside her, smiling proudly. When Evelyn reached the porch, she paused. Her door, looked exactly the same. Her hand trembled as she placed the key into the lock. The click echoed in her chest. She stepped inside. Home. Everything felt exactly as she left it, warm, quiet, filled with the presence of a life she built with love, not greed. She sat on her favorite chair, looking around the living room. For the first time in weeks, she did not feel alone. She felt whole again. Later that evening, she opened her old wooden desk and rewrote her will. Not out of bitterness, but clarity. Her house, her belongings, her savings. Everything would go not to the children who betrayed her, but to the people who stood by her when she had nothing left. Margaret, Lila, and a small portion for the facility's library fund. Her final act of revenge was not loud or cruel. It was simply fair. Her children tried to take everything from her. In the end, they lost everything they tried to steal. Evelyn poured herself a cup of tea and sat on the porch, the setting sun painting the sky in soft gold. She had her house. She had her dignity. She had her life back. And this time, she promised herself, no one would take it away again.